Welcome everybody and thanks for joining us today. My name is Roz and I am one of the members of the psychotropical research team. I'm very pleased to have Dr. Ken Gillman joining me today with an interview getting to know Dr. Gillman. For those of you that are not familiar with him, he is a retired psychiatrist and a neuropharmacologist with a very impressive research background, which I am going to ask him about through this interview. So thank you for joining us today, Dr. Gillman, and I'm going to start with the first question. So welcome. And our first question to you is, where did you grow up, Dr. Gillman?
Oh, well, in southern rural England.
So a small town?
No, a village. My father was a country doctor, and we lived in a beautiful little village called Kintbury, which almost exactly halfway across England. So if you draw a line from London to the other side, we'd be halfway along it.
Oh, it sounds beautiful. Cold though, southern England. So my next question was there an influence in your formative years that made you decide to go into medicine?
Not really, no. I suppose I was just always a scientist at heart. And when I came to go up to university, I already had the idea that I might want to travel the world. And I decided that having a medical degree was a good passport to be able to go wherever I wanted to go.
Right.
My father, who was a doctor, of course,
Yes,
didn't try to influence me to go into medicine, uh, but it seemed a logical choice.
right. So where did you go to study?
I studied in London at Guy's Hospital.
Okay. And so did you start off in medicine and then what made you choose psychiatry?
Um, Basically, I wanted to study something that involved people. Always nice to have contact with people, and something which would continue to be challenging throughout my life. And I thought, well, the brain's the most complicated organ in the body, and it's rather unlikely that no matter how rapidly medical science evolves, the brain is going to be interesting and challenging until I go senile.
That's a great segue into my next question because my next question is, was it a rewarding career or a challenging career or perhaps both?
Both, of course.
Yeah.
Certainly challenging.
Mm.
Um, Medicine generally is very hard work,
Yeah.
stressful, challenging, difficult. Yeah. Mm.
I'm sure that you spent many hours devoted to the cause. What was your motivation then, post-retirement? You decided to start psychotropical research. So what was your initial motivation and has that motivation changed as you've gone along? Because I believe you retired in 2006.
Yes. I guess one would use the word retirement in a rather flexible kind of way. Um, I guess because I started off with a research orientation, and I regard myself as fundamentally a scientist as well as a clinician, I was obliged to cease clinical work, that is, earning a living consulting with patients in my private practice here in Mackay, uh, because of my difficulties with my back and my neck, which made it impossible to continue my medical practice. And so I ceased work. So I've had no income since then. I've lived on my retirement income,
Mm-hmm. And your
which
motivation.
fortunately which fortunately has been sufficient so that I've been able to devote my time to you know theoretical research in psychopharmacology rather than trying to earn a living some other way.
So what motivated you to start psychotropical research?
Um, Initially, it was educating the doctors who referred patients to me when I was in clinical practice.
Yep.
And then as the internet developed, it seemed logical to put it online so anybody could access it. And it just developed progressively. Obviously, it expanded considerably after I retired, because when I was
Yes.
working, it was very difficult to write scientific papers and things like that. It's very arduous, time-consuming business.
For
It's
sure.
not just a casual aside. So
No.
until I retired, I didn't really have time to write the papers that I had in my mind that I wanted to write. And of
Yes.
course, I wanted to write them because it was more and more apparent as my career progressed that much of clinical psychiatry was not in keeping with current knowledge in pharmacology, shall we put it like that?
Well
So I
said.
found myself in considerable disagreement with much of what was being touted in clinical psychiatry. And part of the reason for that, and I think this for our listeners is pretty important to understand, the money that drives medical education has become progressively more and more sourced from the pharmaceutical industry than it was
Mm,
when I first started in medicine. So
mm,
that almost all of the scientific, so-called scientific material that doctors are exposed to is guided or formed by the pharmaceutical companies. There's
mm,
very little independent information in the medical education sphere that is
mm,
not determined and influenced by the drug companies. And that
mm.
produces an immense distortion of the whole scientific landscape.
Yes, and makes it very challenging for patients. So,
Indeed.
has your motivation changed over the years that you have been doing your work with psychotropical research?
Um, Not perhaps not my motivation, but what has changed quite substantially, Roz, is that initially, when I retired, as I said, I wanted to write some scientific papers to put right
Educate.
some of the things that I thought were being misrepresented in the literature. And
Yes,
I have been quite successful in that endeavour. And as you know, I'm regarded as a world expert in MAOIs and serotonin toxicity. So I
yes,
guess that shows I have had some success in the academic sphere. But the trouble is, publishing academic papers, whether they're purely about pharmacology or whether they're more orientated towards clinical medicine and influencing the clinical practice of psychiatrists in the everyday world, they have very little influence. It
yeah,
takes a very long time to change anything.
yes,
And because so much of it is driven by what I would call advertising, in other words, the financial influence of the drug companies, either by direct advertising. And don't forget, in some countries, Ros, like America, companies are allowed to directly advertise to the public. So
yes,
people go along to their doctor demanding a new drug because they've seen advertisements for it,
yes,
which is
yes,
not really a very good way of shaping sensible clinical pharmacology. But
yes,
that's what happens.
yeah,
So I
yeah,
realized that publishing scientific papers, although it was very satisfying for me in saying, well, I was right all along, now I've convinced everybody I was right, that doesn't really achieve anything. And so I decided the best way to achieve things was to educate the non-medical community, because I think that what's going to change practice is patients demanding particular treatments.
mm.
And
Here,
if they're
here,
demanding something based on good scientific information, then that's better than demanding something based on advertisements.
yes. And I can hear the MAOI community giving a cheer in your favour for that. You've been incredibly helpful. So I'm going to ask you a question in a different direction. Do you have any, what do you find if you're in periods of high stress? Because stress is part of life and our journey. Is there something that you either recommended to patients or throughout your life that you would recommend in times of high stress to help with relaxing or dealing with it? And I can see you pointing at your puppy dog down there. The animals.
There's actually something on the website about the
Right.
therapeutic effect of dogs. Jedi
Yes.
is here saying, yes, I'm here. Yep, you're talking about me, aren't you?
Yeah.
Look, I suppose I've forgotten what pressure and stress was like since I retired so long ago. My retirement motto, I'll have to tell everyone what my retirement motto is, although it won't be easily understood by those who don't speak French. Rien n'est important.
And the translation is?
Nothing is important.
Yes. Yes.
Which is really a reflection of Stoic philosophy.
Yes. Yes.
I guess if you said, do I have any deep philosophical beliefs, I would say that I'm a student to some extent of Stoic philosophy.
Yes. Yeah. And there's one that I like, and it says it's going to be okay, and if it's not okay, it's still going to be okay. So, that's kind of how life journey goes.
Yep.
So what advice, here's taking in another direction, what advice would you give to your 20-year-old self now in reflection?
Buy a time machine, go forwards to when you're my kind of age now, talk to yourself, and then go back again.
If only we could.
So I've forgotten who it was that said something about, energy is wasted on the young and wisdom is wasted on the old because they haven't
Yes,
got the energy to put it into effect.
yes, 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 it really is
You
the wrong
can't
way
you
around.
can't win, can you?
No, it's the wrong way around. All right, and we've only got a couple of questions left. So, what's the last book you've read, and what's the genre of books that interest you generally? And I think I could tell this, but please answer.
I'm interested in history and historical biographies.
Hmm.
The book beside my table at the moment is The History of the City of Istanbul, and the book on my bedside table is The History of the Huxley Family. Uh, I don't know how many people will understand who they were, but Thomas Huxley was the fellow who supported Darwin's theory of evolution
Yes.
and was the protagonist at the famous debate between Bishop Wilberforce of the church and the proponents of Darwinian ideas. Yes.
You honestly, your brain is incredible, Dr. Gillman. To be able to still take all this knowledge in, and historical
I wish that
information.
was true, Ros. Sadly, I don't remember as much of what I read now as I used to when I was younger. That's what we were
I,
saying before. Experience is less helpful when you're older because you haven't got the energy to do anything with it.
yes, yes. And look, my final question to you before we sum up is: you can have dinner with anyone, alive or dead. Who would you choose? Why? And what wine would you be bringing? I know you well.
What a great question. Uh, Look, it's difficult to isolate one person, isn't it?
Well, give me
I
a
mean, when
couple
you
if you
read
need to.
historical biographies, you keep saying, gosh, what a fascinating story. I'd really like to sit down with this person, whether
Yes.
it was Darwin or the famous physicist, Feinberg.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so many people. Christopher Hitchens, I must admit. I'm a very non-religious person, and I've always admired the intellect of Christopher Hitchens. But yes, it would be a very long list. I'd need several months to fit them all in,
It'd
and
be a long dinner.
the wine would depend on the food,
Yes.
and it would also depend on the company,
Yes.
because there's no point in having special wines with people who aren't going to enjoy them. So if people aren't interested in wine, there's no point in giving them the best wine.
Yes.
Waste of time and
Is
money.
there a favourite wine that you have? Your favourite tipple?
Depends on the day of the week.
Red or white?
Both. And pink. And sparkling. And
What a joy.
fortified. I had a lovely
Well
glass
done.
of
Well done.
eclectic. I think my outlook on almost everything, but particularly on wine, is eclectic.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Gillman, for spending some time with us today, getting to know you on a much more personal level. We are very thankful to you, the work that you do for patients, and I speak on behalf of the MAOI community who I often am speaking with, and you've been an absolute godsend to most of us, being available on, a video chat, answering questions, which, as you and I both say, many questions are not just simple questions that involve simple answers, but you continue to be there for us, championing the cause. And, I personally would be lost without your advice. And I know many people feel the same. So thank you for all that you do. Keep going. And, here's to a nice glass of wine this afternoon.
Thank you for your kind words, Ros, and we'll talk again in due course.
Thank you.